how fast are you going today? Like, how fast are you going today? Like, how fast did you wake up? How fast did you get ready this morning? How fast did you get the kids in the car? Maybe not fast enough. How fast did you make lunch plans, dinner plans, day plans? How fast do we have our whole week already booked out? It's not even Sunday afternoon yet, guys. How fast are we going? It's kind of amazing when I think about, speed and how fast we can go. Today I made it from Hilliard to church in about like 15 minutes. And for some people, a 15-minute commute feels like forever. And, I passed neighborhood by neighborhood, stoplights, jumped on the highway, and got here in 15 minutes. And I felt like it took a little while. But then I was imagining, well, what was life like 200 years ago before we could drive these things? And maybe if I was, had the ability to, I'd have a horse and I'd be able to get to church that way. It would have taken me about 2.5 hours probably to get from Hilliard to church today on horseback. And it reminded me also of a moment from high school. And back in high school, I went to a Christian school, and there were a lot of rules at this Christian school. I wore a uniform. I was team green polo shirt pretty much every day. And one of the rules was no beards allowed. And I was bad at that rule because I was a punk and wanted to test fates. So one day, one of my teachers came up to me and was like, Dane, you need to go shave right now. She handed me a razor. And I was, a little smart aleck. And I'm like, well, we're here to learn about that Jesus guy, right? She's like, yeah. I'm like, well, Jesus, he had a beard. She said, well, Jesus also walked everywhere. So think about that when your parents pick you up. Traveling and the increase of the speed, it's a very recent development in our human history. Jesus' entire ministry, these things we read about in the Gospels, they took place within about 100-mile radius from where Jesus was born in Bethlehem. I drive about 100 miles to see my grandma for the day. And for roughly 1,800 years after Jesus, people were still walking around to get to places. They were traveling on the backs of animals. Then came the Industrial Revolution. It changed everything. It gave us steamboats, trains, better roadways, and travel systems. And travel started doing this thing where it got faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And now we can fly across the country in just a few hours. We can even drive the whole span of Jesus' entire ministry in a day. It's crazy. Our culture has become a culture of speed. Our culture is built on speed. Speed became the defining point of progress in our culture today. If you ain't first, you're what? You're last. So today, if you get enough money, or if you know the right people, you can even blast off this planet going 17,600 miles an hour in a rocket ship. That's 5 miles per second. Whoa. Here's the thing. Increasing speed, it doesn't mean we save time. It usually just means we cover more distance. Again, increasing speed doesn't always mean we save time. It usually just means we cover more distance. We travel faster today than at any point in our society's history. We fill our calendars with more activities, more appointments, more places to be because we can, and we hate going slow. It adds this pressure to be everywhere all the time. Does anybody else relate to that? Like calculating on Google Maps the time it takes to drive across Columbus to pick up the kids at the right moment, to be able to bring them to practice, to be able to go meet grandma for dinner, to be able to then go to work the next day. It's just so many things we try to just fit into our schedules. Speed, it makes us busy. It makes us frantic even. And a few weeks ago, I was thinking about this, and I challenged myself to try something. And I challenge all of us to maybe try this as well, whether it's in your neighborhood or maybe during a lunch break at work or just a simple commute that you have. I decided I was going to take the space from Sawmill, where I get on 270, down to work here at Discover. And I wanted to notice a few things by experiencing it at different speeds. So first, I went 45 miles an hour on my car, down Sawmill. And what did I notice? I noticed there were a lot of angry drivers. Yellow lights that I had to beat. There were construction zones. They looked like they'd been there for a while. Potholes. And I was just focused on all of these things that were either going my speed or that were keeping me from going my speed. After I drove down, I decided to get the old bike out, and I tried biking instead. And I took the safest route that I could find, and that was not on Sawmill. That was probably like parking lots, because I didn't want a death sentence. The place is crazy. But what I noticed when I biked it, I noticed that there was like a line of cars that almost reached the road from Einstein Bagels. And I remembered they had some good sandwiches. I might hit that up for lunch. I remembered the smell from a couple of restaurants I hadn't seen before. I rode by the Honda dealership, and that reminded me, oh yeah, that car that I do drive needs an oil change. Then I noticed the music shop across the road. It's called Redig Music. I normally buy my guitar strings like online, and they get shipped to me in a few days. But never in a million years did I think I can walk across the street and buy them and do that right now. I also noticed there was a new coffee shop over there by Meyer. It smelled wonderful. It was great. It's a Yemeni coffee shop. These are all things that I'd missed when I was driving at car speed. And finally, after my bike, I decided I wanted to walk most of it. And walking at the speed of around 3 miles an hour, I could take in even more. Not just the smells, but I also got the experiences. I stopped in and I had one of those best coffees I'd have in a while. And beyond the food and the shops, I noticed people. There were people at bus stops. There were some on corners holding signs. I noticed there were people coming and going from stores, sitting on patios, enjoying the sunshine. I even had the opportunity for simple conversations with strangers that day. No one's asking you how you're doing when you're flying by at 45 miles an hour. And as a church, a theme that we want to focus on this year is recenter. And a part of recentering is slowing down, looking around in our own radius, our own circles of our community around us, especially with those around our 2 miles of our church and our homes. And I think this is a practice that really helps us become more aware of the people that God is putting around us. So however you can implement something like that, I just challenge you to do that this week. Because slowing down, it's how we keep in step with God's Spirit. Galatians 5:25, it says, since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. And if we're honest, a lot of us, we're not walking in step with the Spirit. Man, we are just sprinting right now, not because we're running towards anything sacred, because culture, it's telling us to move faster. And somewhere along the way, we started measuring our lives by how much we can fit in, how much we can do, but not in how well we keep in step with God's Spirit. So we as disciples, as followers of Jesus, when we match culture's demand of speed, we just end up filling our lives with more and more. And we become risked in just getting trapped in a loop of distraction where the days just fly by. And this isn't just about how fast we travel or drive. It's about how easily we fill our time, our energy, our headspace, and our spirit, and the things that we consume. We consume and consume. Even when what we're consuming might technically be good. Every Sunday morning, like clockwork, a little bit over an hour ago, I think, I got a notification on my phone. And I think a lot of us probably did too. What notification would that be? Screen time notification? Yeah, I like to ignore that one. But this week, I actually looked at it, and my goodness, I think you should too. Even right now, if your phone is out, like it probably already is, that's okay. Look at screen time. Take a look, see what it's looking like. My daily average screen time, a little over 5 hours. Now I can think about that. I'm like, I justify that because, that includes like work things. Yeah, scripture reading. I read my Kindle on my phone. I text my mom, videos like Reddit, YouTube, music, podcasts. Wow, that does fill up a lot of time. And actually, if I keep that pace at the average of like 5 hours, I'm spending 72 full days this year with the screen on. 72 full days. That's 2.5 months. And guys, what's crazier is my screen time is well below the average of America today. Well below. Now, it's easy to think, man, this phone, this is just taking up so much of my time. Like if I could just simplify my life, get rid of this phone, like if I could just throw this out the window, I should, right? But here's the thing, our phone isn't the bad guy. It's not the bad guy. Like it's not the distraction. It's actually the delivery system to the content that we consume, right? I heard it said that the phone is like the needle. Nobody is actually addicted to the needle. They're addicted to the substance inside. We are being discipled by the substances we consume. And the time that we spend with this thing, it does matter. And many of us, we are being shaped, we're being formed, we're being discipled by voices that we hear in our earbuds, like podcasts, the news, opinions, experts. Like we listen to them more than we realize. We listen to them when we do laundry, when we lay down at night, when we shower, when we drive. We fill more and more of our waking moments with just substance because we can't stand the silence. How often do we slow down and just embrace the quiet? And just be. Deuteronomy 29:29, it says, the secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and to our children forever. See, we're not created to know everything all at once, nor should we. We were created to walk with the God who does. And our God, he doesn't rush around. In living life like culture tells us at full throttle, we lose touch with our walk with God very easily because these consuming distractions, even the good ones, they can sometimes rob us of noticing these things that God is doing right in front of us. They keep us from the ways that he wants to shape and form us as his disciples. They keep us busy. Japanese theologian Kosuke Koyama, he said this. He said, love has a speed. It's a spiritual speed. It's a different kind of speed from the technological speed to which we're accustomed. It goes on in the depth of our life, whether we know it or not, at 3 miles per hour. It's the speed that we walk, and therefore the speed that God walks. Speed is not progress. If we want to catch up to the voice of God, we have to slow down. God's speed is 3 miles an hour. And that's kind of funny to think about. But if the church, if we are always moving faster and faster at full throttle, and if we're moving 100 miles an hour, we have to ask, man, if God's moving at 3 and we're moving at 100, who's leading who here? Henry Nouwen, he pointed out that it is no accident that the words discipleship and discipline, they come from the same root word. Because once we decide to follow Jesus, we have to ask ourselves, what disciplines are going to help me stay faithful to that choice? See, disciples, they live disciplined lives. And in discipline, we often think like, oh no, grandpa's getting the belt out. It's like, that's not the kind of discipline we're talking here. Discipline, meaning that we are creating space in our own schedules. We are creating space in our own life. We're creating space where God can act. And this is where the countercultural example of Jesus, it can take over the example of slowing down, the example that he uses of silence and solitude. And so when was the last time that we have put that effort into creating space to slow down, to change a rhythm in our life and give it over to God? And that's a hard question. And I don't think the problem's time. Our screen time, it tells us we have plenty of it. Plenty of it. The problem's discipline. And as a church, we want to move at the speed of Jesus. And over the past few weeks, we're looking at how Jesus lived. He lived counter to the culture around him. And this discipline of slowing down, it is something that Jesus, he regularly practiced through solitude and silence. Through solitude and silence, we notice that they are among the most essential and the most misunderstood spiritual practices when our world is moving at 100 miles an hour. When we look at Jesus, we know Jesus, he prioritized the countercultural discipline of slowing down through silence and solitude. Throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus, he's making intentional space for this practice. It wasn't an occasional habit, it was a way of life. This wasn't just a getaway or a pause from his life and his mission. This is actually a way that he prepared for it. It was how Jesus, he began his ministry. Out in the desert, he took time alone in solitude. And out there, he was tempted by the devil. It's how he reflected before making many significant decisions. It's how he grieved. It's how he responded when there was so much demand on him in his ministry. And it's even how he prepared himself to face the cross when he was in the garden. Jesus took time alone to be with God. Luke 5:16, it says, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." Often, not once in a while. It was regular, intentional, essential. Now, we don't get long-winded explanations of what Jesus did in his alone time with God. Because honestly, there's no single formula for how we should spend our alone time with God in solitude. We see Jesus, he's withdrawing very early in the morning. There's times he goes out in the evening. He spends entire nights alone in prayer. He made that time for it. Wherever he could find space, he went to the garden, he went to mountainsides, he went to the wilderness. Sometimes he even had to get out onto a boat in the middle of the sea to get away from everybody. Jesus, he made time to get away and be with the Father. And the clear picture of this is in Luke 6:12-19. This is right before he made the decision of choosing his 12 disciples. Jesus, he had a major decision ahead of him as he's kicking off his ministry. It was building momentum. And I can just imagine the pressure was probably a little high, but what does he do? It says, one day soon afterward, Jesus went up on a mountain to pray, and he prayed to God all night. Don't skip over that verse. It's super easy to skip over that. That was all night. He spent time alone with God. And at daybreak, he called together all of his disciples. He chose 12 of them to be apostles. Here are their names. Simon, who he named Peter. Andrew, Peter's brother. James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas. James, son of Alphaeus. Simon, who is called the Zealot. Judas, son of James. Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed him. And when they came down from the mountain, the disciples stood with Jesus on a large level area, surrounded by many of his followers and by the crowds. There were people from all over Judea and all of Jerusalem, from as far north as the sea coasts of Tyre and Sidon. They had come to hear him and be healed of their diseases, and those troubled by evil spirits were healed. Everyone tried to touch him because healing power went out of him, and he healed everyone. Note this, that before Jesus made one of the most foundational choices for his ministry, before he called together his disciples, before he met the masses, before he showed God's power through miracles, he spent the entire night alone with God. And from that place of prayerful solitude, he came down, chose his community, and continued with them in his ministry. That is a countercultural pattern. How often do we miss that? Like we want to do big things for God's kingdom. We want to do big things in our lives. We want to lead the way in ministry. We want to be successful or be part of a good community. But we never prioritize taking time alone. Why does that come at the end? Jesus put that at the beginning. See, Jesus, he protected solitude in his life from beginning to end. Solitude mattered to him. And if it matters to him, it must matter to us. Silence and solitude is the space which Christ speaks and reshapes us. It's where we're reminded that God is not just somebody that we get to talk about. He is somebody that we walk with. We spend time with him. So embrace the silence, embrace the practice of stillness, embrace slowing down. And we find that in the quiet, God's waiting. God is already there. We create space for God to move before we do. That is countercultural. It's not about checking out from what's going on around us. It's about checking in to the one who calls us in the first place. Now, we learn a few things through silence and solitude. It's in silence and solitude that we slow down enough to be able to listen to God. Silence, it's not just a break from the noise. It's not just a timeout from busyness or a little getaway. It is slowing down enough to remember how to listen. We move so fast, we scroll, we work, we react, we plan. We forget how to sit still and listen to the voice of God, not just hear about him, not just read about him, but not just to talk to him, but actually just to take time to sit in his stillness and listen to him. And here in Luke, Jesus knew this. Solitude was his preparation, and in that space, he prayed. You know that prayer, it's not just a list of requests that we send up to God. Prayer, it is intentional time spent with the Father. Prayer, it's how we listen to God too. And if I'm being real, prayer can be really hard. It can. It can be really hard to do sometimes. Like I expect God to respond in a certain way and he doesn't. Or like there's days I sit down to pray and all I have are just scattered thoughts, tired sighs, that looping grocery list that I got to do later. And it just won't leave my brain. And so prayer gets hard. You ever been there? Yeah. But I'm reminded here in silence and solitude that you don't need the perfect words. God doesn't need you to say the perfect words. He wants to spend time with you. Ecclesiastes 3:7, it says, there is a time to keep silence and a time to speak. And I've recently lost my brother in really unforeseen circumstances. It came as a shock to me and my family. And there were a lot of people that had a lot of good things to say. And if you've ever lost somebody, you know that there's not really words that can help fill that void of loss as you go through that grief. But one moment really stuck out to me, and it's when my friend Brant came up to me. Because Brant, he lives in Nashville, Tennessee. He made his way all the way up to Columbus and didn't tell me, and he waited through the visitation line, and he got up there to the front. Didn't say a word. He just gave me the biggest hug. And in that moment, like, man, we got to cry together. I don't think we even said one word that day. I mean, he drove like 7 hours. That's crazy to me. But in that moment, it just meant so much to me. He didn't have to say anything. Some days, silence, it's louder than anything that we could come up with to say. And some days, all we can do is just show up and be embraced in the presence of God and sit still and realize that that's enough. Richard Foster, he said, a disciplined person is the person who can do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. And silence is one of those things. And we recently wrapped up March Madness. My brackets were atrocious. They were awful. The teams that go far, they're not always the teams that can score. They are the teams that score when it matters the most. Most of us, if you put us on a basketball court, give us the ball, give us enough time, we might be able to get that ball into that net. But what we can't do is do it when it matters most. That's what the pros are for. A person disciplined in silence knows how to speak when it matters most and knows when to keep quiet when it matters most. And when we listen, we are often reminded again and again of who God says that we are. Newen said, to pray is to listen to the one who calls you my beloved daughter, my beloved son, my beloved child. To pray is to let that voice speak to the center of your being, to your guts, and let that voice resound in your whole life. That's the voice we need, because every other voice in our culture today is telling you to prove yourself. It's telling you to prove that you're lovable, prove that you're worth something, prove that you can bring something to this table or to this organization, to this friend group, do something relevant, be important, be seen. But in silence, away from it all, you hear the truth that reshapes everything, that you are already loved, that you are already known, that you are already chosen, and there is no word that changes that. And I think that's what Jesus went to the mountainside to hear again and again, to hear the voice of the Father. And that's what we go into silence and solitude to remember. Because when our life is loud, when our pace is 100 miles an hour, we got to find our mountain. We got to listen to the voice that calls us loved. And it's in silence and solitude that we slow down enough to be with God. This is the practice of slowing down, right? It's not a trend. It's not just modern minimalism, something that comes and goes. This is something that is ancient. Slowing down is ancient. King David, he wrote a psalm that travelers, they would sing as they ascended the road to the temple to Jerusalem for worship. Step by step in community and even in solitude, song by song, they were literally walking into the presence of God, and they would sing songs like this psalm, Psalm 131, 1-2. Just listen to these words. Lord, my heart is not proud. My eyes are not haughty. I don't concern myself with matters too great or too awesome for me to grasp. Instead, I have quieted myself. Like a weaned child who no longer cries for its mother's milk. Yes, like a weaned child is my soul within me. That's the attitude we take. It's an image of deep contentment and peace. It's not busy. It's not striving. It's not noise. It's stillness. Like a child that is just so content in the presence of the parent, no longer demanding anything, just with them. That's how we approach God. And like those ancient travelers preparing their hearts for worship, in this life of discipleship, we have that same inner quieting that must be a part of our rhythms. There's so much noise in our minds and our hearts with concerns and worries and burdens, and God cares so much about those. He does. And when we quiet ourselves, we know God is there. And he's not just there with answers, not just there with direction, because those don't always come right away, but he is there with himself. And solitude is that reminder we have. Now, one way in our time alone with God that we can make space with him is by practicing this thing called a centering prayer. Now, if you struggle with silence and solitude, a centering prayer is something that is amazing to help you reorient your head and your heart to the presence of God in your life. Because God is present in your life right now, right in this moment. He's present in your life. When you lay down at night tonight, he is present in your life. A lot of times, we're just not able to remember it because we're so busy. A centering prayer is a time we get to remember a verse or a statement or something that brings us back to remembering that. So we're going to practice a centering prayer through Psalm 46:10. So just take this quick moment. Let's be still. Let's put aside our afterthoughts. Let's take a breath. Let your mind slow down. Know that God is present with you right now. When your mind starts to wander, you can read out the verse that pulls you back. Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world. When your mind keeps wandering, you remember, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. When was the last time that you simply let yourself pause and be with God? Pastor and writer Dave Lamas, he said, solitude, it's about creating emotional and spiritual space, which allows Christ to build in us an inner sanctuary where we can commune with God, unite with God's will, and enjoy his presence. Silence and solitude, that is what that practice is for. It is to commune with God, unite with his will, and enjoy being with him. Not just a moment of praying for him to fix everything, but simply being with the one who holds everything together. Now, silence and solitude, it moves us from complacency or isolation or loneliness into this deeper understanding of God's presence in our lives. Solitude, it's difficult, not just in practice, but how we respond to it. Each of us, we come to this countercultural discipline with different struggles. And for some, it's complacency because change is hard and why would I want to do anything different? For others, it's isolation. Like who wants to be by themselves? And it brings up this deep sense of loneliness. But even in these tensions, there's an invitation to lean into this practice, not to escape those feelings, but to move through them with the presence of God alongside you. Now, a couple issues that can come into hand for us. How many of us here are extroverts? Any extroverts here? Now, it's amazing. I don't quite relate to extroverts that well. I don't feel recharged when I'm around people, but extroverts, they do. And the danger when practicing solitude and silence for extroverts, it's that it's easy to just think, man, I don't need that. Solitude, it comes and goes based on how tired or overwhelmed we are. But when you're energized around people, solitude, right, it's going to feel unnecessary. But Jesus, he doesn't call us into solitude when we feel like it. He didn't go into solitude because he felt drained and was like, yeah, I just need to get away. No, he knew what filled him up, and it was his reminder of who he was with his Father. Now, Jesus calls us from that complacency to solitude, to make this a rhythm, a consistent rhythm in our lives. Now, like me, those introverts here love being alone, love it. People are complicated. Get me away. I recharge best in my time alone. Now, you might think of silence and solitude and be like, man, that one, I got that covered. Yep, I can do that, get that, already on it. The danger here is turning solitude into spiritual self-isolation. John Mark Comer, right, he points out that for introverts, this solitude, it can become a spiritual justification for narcissism. Wow. Instead of forming us into people of love. I have a tendency to just want to get away from people for a while. And this danger here is when solitude is founded in not to be with God, but just to avoid others. It misses the mark. True solitude, it's never escapism. It's not getting away from people. It is getting with God so that we can return to people changed, because the state that we are in is that state that we give to other people. And like Jesus in Luke 6, he went up, he prayed all night. He didn't stay up there in isolation. He came down to the mountaintop where he chose his community and he did his life. He did ministry with his disciples. It continued on with others. Let's be honest. Some of us, we also avoid solitude because we just fear being alone. Not because we're too extroverted or we're too introverted, but because it just stirs up pain, because being alone is terrifying. It doesn't feel good to be alone. So we blast the music, keep the screen on. We do anything we can to fill our time just so we don't have to hear the silence. The beauty of Christ-like solitude is that it never leaves us alone. Solitude is God's presence. Richard Foster, he said, loneliness is inner emptiness, but solitude, it is inner fulfillment. Solitude is more of a state of mind and heart than it is a place. There is a solitude of the heart that can be maintained at all times. Crowds, or the lack of them, have little to do with this inward attentiveness. In the midst of noise and confusion, we are settled into a deep inner silence. Whether alone or among people, we always carry with us a portable sanctuary of the heart. That's what Jesus had, a portable sanctuary of the heart that he could draw to wherever he was at. Whether he was on that mountaintop in the middle of a crowd, he carried the peace of the Father with him and reminded himself of it constantly. After solitude, he always re-entered into community, not rushed, not scattered, but centered in knowing who he was. Solitude is not an escape from life. It is preparation for it. Solitude isn't the absence of people. It is the presence of God. Solitude isn't about tuning out. It's about tuning in to the voice that calls you loved. So how do we begin, practically speaking, implementing silence in solitude? It might feel intimidating, and some of us, we don't know where to start. Others, you feel like you've probably tried, and it's just tough to keep that consistent thing going. But the good news is this. Today, you have control to slow down to God's speed, 3 miles an hour. And here are a few ways to begin building a slowing down rhythm in your life. First is just take advantage of those little solitudes. Now, little solitudes are those small moments that are tucked in your daily routines, just the few minutes that you wake up before others, or you walk to the car, you go get a coffee break, you stand in line doing dishes, things we do all the time. You can use these moments to reorient your heart towards God, remembering his presence in your life. Let them be moments to be silent, to listen, and to rest. You can practice inward quietness as a way of recentering your morning, where you can set aside 5 minutes to just use silence to reflect, where do I need God's presence today? Like, am I making conscious choices about how I'm spending my day? In my schedule, are there any places that God is telling me to rest? You can set aside a daily or a weekly time for centering prayer, what we practiced earlier, that simple prayer, sitting before God, letting your heart settle, and when your mind wanders, pull it back with that verse, pull it back with that phrase, Psalm 46:10. You can even read Psalm 23, John 15, any verse that reminds you about who you are and who God is. You can take walks. Whether it's around your neighborhood or in a local park, you can go take a walk without your phone, without music, and let nature just speak louder than you. It's an amazing time to be able to let your soul just take a breath and recharge. You can even engage in creative solitude. Like, solitude doesn't mean you have to be inactive and just sit there and do nothing. You can spend time sketching, reading, singing, writing, taking photos, gardening, working out, sitting on the porch. Like, these are all things that God wants to be present with you in. You can even try wordless days. Like, if you struggle with constant noise or never knowing what to say in prayer, spend a few moments or part of your day, or if you're feeling it, maybe the full day, without using words, not talking, not texting, not posting. And as you do it, you reflect, why is this so hard? Like, what is God showing me here in the quiet? You're even able to practice solitude with other people. Any of these things you can do with other people. I know that sounds a little weird, but you can go on silent walks together, sit together with people in a few moments of quiet. And a good thing to do is just reflect with others about what you're learning and how God is speaking to you. You can hold each other accountable through these times. It's a good practice. Now, start small. Start simple. But if you're not practicing silence and solitude, please just start. Please. Because the heart of this practice, it is not silence for silence's sake. It's about being with God. It's about knowing him, about resting in him. It's about slowing down and being shaped by him. If you want help building this countercultural rhythm, our church staff and our whole church, we're here for you. Like, we would love to help you grow closer to Jesus, to really, truly understand what it means to have a God who cares so much for us, who died for us, who was buried, who rose again for the forgiveness of sins. That is our God, and he didn't stop there. He wants to have a relationship with us, and he wants to walk through it with you, in the silence, in the noise, through it all. You're not alone in this, and that's the whole point, that silence and solitude, it might feel empty at first, but they always lead to presence. They lead to God's presence. So if you didn't come out with anything today, just hear this. Slow down. Come away, be still. Be with God. And let him show you again who he is and who you are.